Okay, so we've had a big discussion and I missed it all. But you know, a few weeks ago we talked about the Kent State shootings, um, and compared those protests where somebody was shot to last summer's protests, or all, different things we're living through right now. And I think it's always, to me, the enjoyment and the value of studying history and knowing about a little bit about history is to put today, whatever's happening today, put it into perspective, right? This is as bad as that other thing that happened a year ago or 100 years ago, or it's not as bad, or this is the way it's similar, this is the way it's different. So first, let's focus on learning about the Spanish flu of 1918, but also think about the past year and the things we've learned, or at least even maybe nothing's different than a year ago except our perspective, right? Those empty store shelves aren't as scary today as they were a year ago. It's still a cause for concern, but the shock, the unknown is taken out of it. So, well, anyway, let's jump in here. So the title is Coronavirus is very different from the Spanish flu of 1918. Here's how. And the subtitle is The Fear is Similar, but the Medical Reality is Not. Let me get us going. It says it was a disease so awful that it terrified people for generations. The 1918 flu pandemic, thought to be the deadliest in human history, killed at least 50 million people worldwide, equivalent to 200 million today, with half a million of those deaths in the United States. And I found an update this morning. I found some statistics. As of today, the COVID-19 virus has killed 537,000 Americans and 2.68 million people worldwide. So, sometimes on that GED test, I don't have a graph here, but you have to think mathematically a little bit. So, which is more people? Well, how can I phrase this? It's the same number, okay? It says half a million of those deaths in the United States. This year, the past year, we've had 537,000. That's half a million, right? It's the same number of people. Which one is statistically more and why? Which one's worse? If they killed the same, let's pretend they each killed half a million people. Which one is worse and why?
The coronavirus is worst and is easy contagious. I think.
Well,
I don't know. I could be wrong.
what does
Just
anybody
my
else think?
opinion.
If they both kill half a million people in the
Uh-huh.
United States, of course, the coronavirus is still going. We don't know how it's going to play out. But let's just say they each kill half a million people, same number of people 100 years ago and today.
Okay.
Which one is worse and why?
Well, I would say coronavirus is worse
Why?
Yeah, me
Yeah, I
too.
think
because we
so
were
too.
so technologically advanced compared to 1918.
True, true.
And the reason why coronavirus, from what I do know, is worse is because her reproduction rate is so much higher than the flu's reproductive rate.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So what it took what over a year for the Spanish flu to circle the earth. It took
Yeah.
months, weeks. So I
Mhm.
think coronavirus is worse because one, we are technologically advanced. We have hand washing abilities, toiletries, things that running water. Um, we have facilities which they didn't have in the 1918. So
Mhm.
washing your hands and hygiene was just a little bit unknown as far as they threw piss pots in the street in 1918.
Yeah, right, right.
In
They're
some
riding
places, right?
horses in
I mean,
1980. Yeah.
riding horses. I mean, so the idea of getting exposed to a bacteria and stuff like that, that was way more rampant anyway. And
True,
now
yeah.
because COVID-19, you know, and there's over half a million people dead and half a million people dead then, I would have to say COVID-19.
I say the
Yeah.
same thing, and it spreads
But
so
Yeah.
fast.
mhm. And
I have a different opinion.
social distancing, right? And then you have to use a mask, things like that, you know?
Mhm.
6 feet apart.
Yeah.
That too.
Right.
Well,
I'm
that's
going to
true.
say this.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to say. I heard what you're saying. Now, I know that I said that I heard the CDC was saying that you get fully vaccinated, you can just gather indoors and visit people, gather wherever indoor place you want without no mask, social distancing. But I said, soon as the pandemic is over, that really won't mean that you can't wash your hands, because you got to protect yourself from the germs like we did before the coronavirus came. That's
Right.
all.
Right.
That's all.
That's the one thing that I think coronavirus really made people pay more attention to is their
Yeah.
own self hygiene.
Mhm.
So I think everybody travels with a bottle of Germex now. We all travel with a mask. I mean, so now we're more aware, like, oh, I touched this, this, and this. And I think most Americans stop touching their faces frequently.
Mhm.
Yes.
Like, in all honesty,
Uh-huh.
we as human people, we touch our face over 2,000 times
Yes.
in a 4-hour period.
I
Mhm.
catch myself telling my kids, don't touch your face, don't touch your face.
We rub
Yeah,
our eyes, we
right, right.
swipe our nose, we rub the sides of our mouth, we move our hair. And all of these things are, well, potential hazards.
Mhm.
So now with knowledge comes power. So I think, and again, I'm just going to go back to, I think maybe coronavirus actually was worse than the 1918 flu.
And
Yeah.
see, with the people that got the shots, like I know somebody that, like my friend just told me about somebody that just got the shot. And right after she just got the shot, now she got sent home because she had a high fever. Now, see, when they say that you can probably be around people, I think they should still wait because look it, she ended up getting the shot and now she got a high fever.
That might just be a symptom of the shot, but
Yeah.
also it
Yeah,
could be,
sometimes
hey,
that
look,
that shot gives you get a little,
Yeah.
like for a day you get some symptoms a little bit. Yeah.
Right.
Well, no, that's a good point, and that's good being good historians, because you're thinking, you guys are thinking, what is different today? If we're going to compare 100 years ago and today, let's
I have a
look at the whole
different
picture.
opinion.
Yeah, what's that?
Yeah, I think the 1918 flu was worse more than coronavirus because from the write-up, it said killed at least 50 million people. And the equivalent of 50 million people then is 200 million today.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely that 500,000 then is more than the 500,000 of today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so that's the other statistic. It said equivalent to 200 million today, and around the world, it's only killed. I looked that up this morning. It's only killed, well, only, but 2.68 million, two and a half, almost 3 million people, compared to what was equivalent to 200 million 100 years ago. Here's what I was thinking. Well, let's say USA population in 1918. 103 million. Okay, so let me pull up my calculator. Here's what I was thinking. If it's a 500,000, let's say 0.5 divided by 103. That's am I right? You carry the 0, that'd be 0.4% of the population died, right? 500,000 it's basically 0.5%. Okay, 0.5% of the U.S. population died in 1918. Now, if we go 0.5 divided by, what is the population today? The U.S. population. So then we go 0.5 divided by 331, and you're talking 0.15%. So what I was thinking was that there were a third, 103 million versus 331 million Americans. There was a third of the Americans alive in 1918 as alive today. But if the same number of people died, 500,000, then that represents a larger fraction of the population. So in my mind, that's what I was thinking. Now you guys took a totally different angle and said, Well, you can't compare the two because what you took into account was medicine is better, right?
Mhm.
If 100 people get sick today and 100 people get sick in 1918, the people today are getting better medical care, right? We have a better understanding of germs, which we're going to talk about that in a bit, and uh, the world is different. Our understanding, science is different, medical science is different. So you guys actually probably did better historians than me, because you said, well, if the same number of people died and we had the advantage today of having better medical science, then it must still be pretty bad. So, you're right. But worldwide, it killed 50 million people, and worldwide today it's only killed 2 million, 2 to 3 million. So it was, I don't know. I don't know the full answer, but the 1918 flu was bad. In some ways it was, in some ways perhaps it was worse, in some other ways perhaps this one is worse. And you can make the argument probably in both directions. But 1918 was bad. And this article doesn't talk about, well, it kind of mentions it a little bit when it talks about how it came to the United States, but it came at the end, the last 2 years of World War One. So it really starts, and the reason they call it the Spanish flu is because it started in Spain. The first big cases were Spain during World War One, over in Europe. Young men packed together, breathing each other's air. It spread very quickly, and then some of those American troops brought it back to the United States. Um, so it says it spread to every part of the world, affecting populations in Japan, Argentina, Germany, and dozens of other countries. Maybe most alarmingly, a majority of those killed by the disease were in the prime of life, often in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, rather than older people weakened by other medical conditions. That is something that's significant. I don't want anybody to die, and I don't want elderly people to die, but let me just say, wouldn't it be more scary if this disease this year was killing people, young, healthy people in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, than if it was older people, right? I mean, it's harsh to say, but that would be more alarming to us if younger people were dying than old people, right? So that would be, that'd be crazy. That'd be scary. Let me finish paragraph 3. As the coronavirus spreads around the world and public anxiety spike, this is a year ago, comparisons between today's situation and the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 are proliferating in journalistic outlets and on social media. What does proliferating mean?
It's an increase, isn't it?
Increasing, yeah, becoming widespread. Okay, so comparisons, this is a year ago, comparisons between 1918 and COVID-19 were proliferating. They were popping up everywhere. Monique, could you read paragraph 4 for us?
While the fearful atmosphere, surgical masks, stockpiling of food, and avoidance of public gatherings, and potential economic ramifications are like those of 1918, the medical reality is quite different. In 1918, the world was a very different place, even without the disruptive influence of World War I. Doctors knew viruses existed, but had never seen one. There were no electron microscopes, and the genetic material of viruses had not been yet discovered. Today, however, researchers not only know how to isolate a virus, but they can find its genetic sequence, test antiviral drugs, and develop a vaccine.
Okay, thank you. So, like I said, medical science is very different back then. They knew about viruses, they had virus theory, but they hadn't seen one. They didn't have the types of microscopes that you need to do it. They hadn't. They didn't know much about the genetics of viruses, so they knew that they knew what a virus was, which wasn't always the case. 500 years ago, if you got sick, maybe it was because, they didn't know you breathed bad air is kind of the best theory they had. But so germ theory, virus theory has come a long way. It hasn't always been around, but 100 years ago they knew that viruses were there, but they couldn't study and know as much about an actual virus as we can today. They didn't have what it took to develop a vaccine. They did. Now, if you study the history, they did ask people to wear masks. People did stockpile food, and they did end public gatherings. A lot of things were canceled. They didn't call it social distancing. They didn't say 6 feet apart, but they did close down schools. They knew how germs were spread. They knew how viruses were spread. They said, okay, if we can keep everybody at home, we'll be better off. So even though it was 100 years ago, they did, if you look at pictures even, you'd recognize a lot of people in masks, no big crowds, a lot of things canceled, events canceled. So that's not so much what this is going to focus on, but I've read other things that kind of say, well, if you got in a time machine and went back 100 years to 1918, it would look familiar, kind of. Jendai, could you read paragraph 5?
Sure, I'll do it. In 1918, it was impossible to test people with mild symptoms so they could self-quarantine. And it was nearly impossible to do contact tracing because the flu seemed to infect and panic entire cities and communities all at once. Moreover, there was little protective equipment for healthcare workers and the supportive care with respirators that can be provided to people very ill with coronavirus. With coronavirus did not exist. With a case fatality rate of at least 2.5%, the 1918 flu was far more deadly than ordinary flu, and it was so infectious that it spread widely, which meant the number of deaths soared.
Okay, so you don't know if it's because it's a harsher virus or because of medicine wasn't as advanced, but the case fatality rate was 2.5%. Ours this year has been, I think early on it was, worst case really was about 1%, and then as we got better in the fall treating it, I don't know what the case fatality rate, but I believe it's well below 1%. So you have a less than 1% chance of dying if you get it. And normally the people that do die have other complications, right? If you're a healthy person, your body can most likely fend off the coronavirus. That wasn't true in 1918. You can be a healthy 20, 30, 40-year-old, and it's gonna take your life. So it's a different virus in 1918. Paragraph 6, researchers believe the 1918 flu spared older people because they had some immunity to it. They theorized that decades earlier there had been a version of that virus, one that was not as lethal and spread like an ordinary flu. The older people living in 1918 would have been exposed to that less lethal flu and developed antibodies. As for children, most viral illnesses, measles, chickenpox, are more deadly in young adults, which may explain why the youngest were spared in the 1918 epidemic. So viruses are, there's types of viruses, right? It's almost like they're animals. There's different species. And so this coronavirus is a newly identified version of a virus. And the 1918, I think, was also a type of coronavirus. It's like families, types of viruses. I think it was another coronavirus type virus. But they're theorizing that perhaps decades earlier there was a similar or the same virus came through. And so everybody alive then it wasn't as deadly, but everybody, people got sick and developed the antibodies. Now, when it returns in 1918, the young don't have the antibodies, the old people do. So that's an interesting, it's an interesting theory. Regardless of the reason, it was a disaster for life expectancy, which plummeted. In 1917, life expectancy in the United States was 51 years. It was the same in 1919, the year before and the year after. But in 1918, it was just 39 years. So 39 compared to 51. Melissa, could you read paragraph 8?
If you can't hear me, let me know because my internet for some reason has been acting up
Okay, you
past
sound
couple
good
days.
now.
All right. The new coronavirus tends to kill older people and those who underlying medical conditions. It it does not seem to kill children, all of which means it will have far less effect, if any, on life expectancies. The wait, March 18, 2021 update US life expectancies. That word right there, I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Expectancy.
Dropped one full year in 2020 from 78.8 years down to 77.8 years. As far as for the coronavirus case fatality rate, it is not yet known, but the latest data from South Korea with 7,478 confirmed infections show a rate significantly higher than the seasonal flu. After testing 100,000 people for the virus, the country appears to have a case fatality rate of 6.65%, though the data is evolving as researchers in other countries track cases.
Okay, so maybe I should have looked that up, the case fatality rate now. But again, it's changed over the last year. It's changed because they've developed new ways and better ways to help people who become sick. But I did hear that, and so I looked it up. For 2020, life expectancy dropped one full year. Okay. So life expectancy is just the average length that you can expect your life to be. Now, if a lot of people die, it's an average, right? It's an average. So if a lot of people died last year, more than normal, then that number is going to go down. And so enough people died that it went down from 78.8 to 77.8. Not nearly as big as 1918, but that's something. That's not nothing. Um, so paragraph 9. What the current situation does have in common with 1918, though, is the atmosphere of public concern. Among the first places the 1918 flu arrived in the United States was Fort Devens near Boston. So many young soldiers were sick and so many were dying that the Surgeon General sent 4 of the nation's leading doctors to investigate. One of them, Dr. William Vaughan, later recalled, hundreds of stalwart young men, strong young men, in the uniform of their country, coming into the wards of the hospital in groups of 10 or more. They are placed on the cots until every bed is full. Yet others crowd in. Their faces soon wear a bluish color. A distressing cough brings up the blood-stained sputum, or just spit, phlegm. In the morning, the dead bodies are stacked about the morgue like cordwood. Well, yikes. Accounts like these scared Americans deeply. Now, here's a couple of posters that I found from 1918, and these would look pretty familiar to us today. Now, of course, the news is very different. So some of this is just getting the news out. Influenza, frequently complicated with pneumonia, is prevalent at this time throughout America. This might be news to somebody, but then this is a sign hung somewhere. It says, this theater is cooperating with the Department of Health. You must do the same. If you have a cold and are coughing and sneezing, do not enter this theater. So that is obviously, this is posted outside of a theater. Drastic steps taken to fight influenza here. Health Board issues 4 p.m. closing orders for all stores except food and drug stores. So they were taking some measures that we would, very much recognize. All stores close at 4 p.m. except food and drug stores. Hours for
Yeah, that's the
factories
same
fixed.
as before too. Well,
Yeah,
out here now.
right. So,
I mean,
you
they were
know,
smart. They had very intelligent people
mhm.
who understood minimal what we understand today.
Right. I mean, this isn't the Dark Ages. I mean, it is 100
No,
years ago, but it is the modern world.
it was.
Um, and I've read another article. I think last year when I was finding this article, I read another article about as the 1918 flu came about, and kind of us similar to us last February and March, as it was coming, and we were wondering how serious is this. There was a big, I forget what the occasion was. It might have been St. Patrick's Day. There was a big parade in Philadelphia that they were going to cancel,
Hmm.
and it must have been a holiday or something, because they did, maybe it was 4th of July. They canceled parades around the country,
Right.
thinking, well, we don't want crowds. But Philadelphia held their parade, and it's like a famous thing with the 1918 flu. Philadelphia
Yes, I
held their
remember
parade,
that. Yes.
and they said that the cases went sky
Straight up.
high,
Yeah.
um, be, because of that parade. People standing, 3 deep on the side of the road, a million people out to see the parade. Um, so no, they knew enough. They're closing stores. They're saying, if you have a cold and are coughing, please don't come into this theater. This would be an interesting topic, a graphic to see, and we could make some good test questions out of this for the GED test. Um,
Mm.
but this is interesting. This is what you would call uh, a primary source, a primary resource when you're studying history. It's from that time, right? So we could gather up, 50 public health posters from the 1918 uh, influenza, and we could learn a lot.
Sure.
Um, Paragraph 10, it says on October 3rd, 1918. Oh, oh no, I think it's something different. Philadelphia closed all schools, churches, theaters, pool halls. A lot of people went to play pool, and other gathering places. Undertakers, people who work at funeral homes, were overwhelmed. Some funeral homes increased their prices sixfold, and some even made the bereaved bury their own dead.
Mm.
That's not something we're doing today. In Tucson, Arizona, the Board of Health forbade people to venture out in public without a mask. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, where schools and theaters were closed, a local newspaper wrote, "The ghost of fear walked everywhere."
Mm.
Um, Olawakimi, could you read paragraph 11?
Similar actions are being taken today. Seattle has closed some public schools. The South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas has been cancelled. The South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas has been cancelled. Apple asked employees to work from home. More than 2,700 people are under some sort of quarantine in New York City, and some Costco stores are having trouble keeping bottled water in stock.
Okay. Now, thank you. Oh, I forgot you were driving. Are you okay are you
Read.
okay?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm a passenger.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good. Well, yeah. You must
I'm
be a
like,
good
darn,
driver.
she did great.
Yeah, really. So think of this as, let's be historians. Think of this was written a year ago. So the person
Yeah.
writing this was the information they had. A big festival was canceled. Apple asked their employees to work from home. 2,700 people under some sort of quarantine in New York City. All that was going to get much worse,
Oh yeah.
you
Nobody was
know.
even talking about schools yet.
Right. Um, but at the time this was written, these were the big concerns for that person. Um, it says, but so far this year, this is again a year ago, the annual epidemic of seasonal flu in the United States is proving much
Mm.
more devastating than the coronavirus. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that there have been at least 34 million infected with flu this season, just the regular flu. 350,000 hospitalizations and 20,000 deaths. So far, coronavirus has killed 27 people in the United States. Well, that
Isn't
was
that
definitely gonna
crazy what
change.
happened in a year?
Yeah.
Mhm.
For the economy, the effects of the 1918 flu, despite factory closings and social disruptions, were hard to disentangle from the profound ones of World War One. That's true. It's hard to kind of isolate. Okay, what's just related to the flu because they also have such crazy things happening with World War One. The world was not as interconnected as it is today, and by the summer of 1919, the pandemic had ended. Coronavirus is already having significant impacts on the stock market and other aspects of the economy, but the long term consequences remain to be seen.
Mm.
So I will send this out. You can click on these links. This one here, it gives just a very short, this is from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. There's a little history of that. There's some, this is actually kind of neat, the historical image gallery. There's a timeline. You can check that out. But I wanted to look at, where do I have? This is the New York Times. I've kind of, every once in a while, and last spring, I checked this every day.
Mm.
But this is, there's lots of information on this
I
paper.
just I just want you to know that I just learned that the Spanish flu pandemic lasted. I don't know if the pandemic, but if they said just the Spanish flu lasted from February 1918 to April 1920.
Mhm.
Huh.
Yeah, it kind of played itself out. It faded away, and maybe this will too. We don't see, just like when I made this a year ago and found this article a year ago, I had no idea the conversation we'd be having today. And I'll teach this another year from now on the 2-year anniversary,
Mm.
and we don't. I mean, we just can't predict. But let's, it's good to get some familiarity with graphs. You got to know those graphs and charts. So let's look at a graph just a little bit. So there's 3 here that I did really last spring. I really checked these every day just to see what the heck was going on in the world. The first one is new reported cases by day. So this is new cases.
And was this just in the U.S.?
This is the United States. Yeah.
Okay.
In last April and May, if we could zoom in on this little portion here, I kept, I was looking at this and thinking, oh boy, that's a lot. And we got through a second wave in the late summer, and it went even higher. And then, yeah, Josiah, you were saying in the winter, look at this. This is this past winter, November, big peak, and what's the biggest date? Probably January 10th. 300,000 new cases.
That's a shame.
Now it looks like for this month looks like the curve is flattening.
Yeah, and it came way down since then. The vaccines are out, and even if we took no, if we did nothing, a vaccine has a life it's going to lead, right? Eventually, either everybody's dead or everybody's immune, one or the other. So it's going to look like this naturally. But we have been taking, especially, maybe it's the vaccine that's working. But
Maybe,
it does
but
look it's leveling out. Yeah.
maybe it is working. I think it is. Now, however, I was watching the news the other day, and they were talking about reopening the city, and they said, "I want to take the vaccines." And the old lady was saying about what she felt about the people saying they want to reopen the city with the vaccines, and they said that I want it to happen quickly because talking about the pandemic when it wants to be done. She said, "Well, I want y'all to do what y'all want to do because I'm tired of these masks." And
Mhm.
I said to myself, I'm tired of them too.
Yeah, we all are. But I mean, look at this progress. Now let's look at actually these 3 charts. There's 3 different charts. So they each tell you 3 different things, and you can decide which data is more important. So this first one is
Huh.
new cases. Okay, there's new cases by day. Then you have new reported deaths by day, and then
Right.
you have, look at the difference between the first one. There's 3 humps, right?
Right.
April, July,
July,
and the winter. The first hump of deaths was
April.
much higher than the summer hump of deaths.
Right.
But then the winter comes back really
Much
strong, and we
higher.
have across the country 4,000 people
Mm.
dying a day.
Right.
Now that's coming down. Now I would say deaths are more important
And if you
to
look at
start.
where you're pointing right now, which is March 6th,
Mhm.
and you go back, and if you look at that graph, they're not too far off. So if you go back into the April of the year prior,
Mhm.
they're very similar. What is it? April 6th. Okay, so we had an
What are you looking
average
for
of
again?
1,298, right? Now go to
Mhm.
March 6th, over
Oh,
to the right,
uh-huh.
and now it's 1,802.
Yeah, so kind of the
So
same number, but now
it's
we're
kind of
coming
the
down
same
instead
number,
of
but
going
now we're
up.
coming down again. And
Yeah.
if you look, yeah, so that's interesting to see that she has a pattern.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
looks like she may until she just fat lines.
Uh-huh. And then the third graph is also important in certain discussions,
Mhm.
hospitalized patients. So you can
Yeah.
get there's three levels of getting COVID, right? You can get it, of
Right.
course you can get it and be asymptomatic, right? And you have the
Right.
virus, but you're fine. You can get it and be sick and be at home and then you recover. You can get it and be so bad that you need to be hospitalized,
Mm.
which is this number, and
And
then
then
you can
dying
get
from
it and you can die from it. So, you know, these three
it.
bits of information would make good test questions. In different situations, you're going to care about these three different things differently. You know,
See,
if you run a hospital and your job is to keep that hospital
Put it on your table.
staffed with nurses and doctors, then you're going to be concerned with the hospitalization number, right?
see, that's what I'm talking about. See, the viruses get active in the winter, and that's a virus. That's a virus. That's a new virus. But that's why cases were rising in when I say the winter. Now it's getting warmer. I think not only is it the vaccines that's working, I think it's mainly the weather
Right,
changing.
right.
Now,
So yeah, yeah.
now President Trump said whatever he wanted to. I think he was just saying it's going to be done by Easter, it's going to be done by the summer because he didn't want people to worry. I think he was just trying to humor people. He was just that kind of person who, was just trying to make people not worry. It wasn't going to end until Easter. It's obvious. It's still going on. I'm
Yeah.
praying. I'm just praying that it will end like Dr. Fauci said. We'll be going back towards it by the fall. Dr.
Mhm.
Fauci, he's a serious kind of guy. He said, I don't know if I told you this, but he said, you may talk about going back to life, but it ain't going to happen until the end of 2021. And I agree because it just may be like that. I know, and he's serious, and he doesn't act like President Trump making people not worried. Now a lot of times I have problems worrying, and
Mm. Well,
and
there are things to worry about, sure, for sure. But, thinking scientifically, as a historian, it's a complex issue, right? You have what affects the life of a virus? Well, you have the are people, 1918 and today, are people going to wear masks, be socially distant? They didn't call it that then, but they closed the theaters and the pool halls and schools and stuff. There's so much that goes on. Um, and this is, as we all knew last year, this is history. It's history in the making.
Right.
Just like we're talking about 2018. In the year 2121, which is a
Mm.
crazy, crazy thing to think about, uh, they're going to be talking about us and how it played out and the things we did and didn't do. And they're going to be looking at graphs just like this.
And they may even have some way more technological advances, and we may actually look really primitive to them
Yeah,
in a
they may
thousand
look at
years, you know,
they'll look at us like we are looking at
at the
1918.
18, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
and not
so yeah.
not because now I know that a lot of times I have trouble worrying, but in 2016 our pastor, he moved on. We have a new pastor, but he moved on. I was a little bit worried about how the transition was going to last. See, he left in August. Our transition started August 2016 to December of 2019. Now, the thing that I'm trying to get to is, um, I kind of was worried when we were going to get a new pastor. I thought it was not. I didn't know anything about the transition yet. Now, how it would play out. Now, my mom said it could be our Christmas present. I said, yeah, but then when I got older, it didn't happen. It didn't happen at all.
Hmm.
It had to take time to get it past her. And the point I'm trying to make is it takes time for people to get better. I know it looks like the vaccines are working, but it still has to take some time. That's all.
Mhm. Oh
That's
yeah,
all.
for
That's
sure.
all. It got to take. It's got to take a lot of time. That's all.
Mhm. Yeah. So again, like I will teach this a year from now, and we'll see what sort of notes I have to put in then. So I'll
Well,
send this out.
well, a year from now, I already will be graduating, but I can pop in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Talk about how the pandemic was in 2 years.
yeah. Right.
In 2 years, you can talk about how it was. That's all.
Mhm. So I'll send
That's
this
all.
out later. Um, as always, I suggest you just give it a read over the weekend. It gets it into your head a little bit more. Click on some of these links at the end. This bottom one is the New York Times, the charts that I looked at, and there's a lot out there. There's some interesting YouTube videos from the 1918 thing, and I like the ones that show you, pictures like this. Let me see if I can grab it. Like this,
Mhm.
the this is kind of neat to see what it was like. And there's be a nurse, earn $15 to $25 a week. Guy getting a shave, more posters. Okay, so check it out. And here's actually, if you look on the left hand side, here's some other pandemics you could, if you really want to worry yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks.
Here's some other ones. So no, I appreciate the conversation today. Um,
Mhm.
Again, not to dwell on it, but it is. I mean, it is. We're living through history, and
We're all
again,
gonna have a story to tell.
yeah, I think so. I think
Mhm.
for sure. So thanks for logging in. Thanks for
Thanks, Matt.
participating, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You guys have a good day.
Hey, I'll
You
talk to you
too.
later.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. See you later.